Welcome to this particular module. As the module states, road freight transport management. We are going to learn about how to manage a road freight operation. So in our discussion, we will start by looking at the ownership of road freight operations. Then after looking at the various types of ownership, we'll move and then we discuss the issues to do with the management function, and we are going to look at the theory of management and what types of management styles do we have. We'll also look at the various roles of managers in a road freight enterprise and whether really the management role changes from a road freight operation from other organizations. So generally, we look at how do you form a road freight organization? How do you formulate policies for that particular enterprise for the purposes of maximizing the returns of the shareholders or the stakeholders? Then after that, we'll look at the marketing of a road freight operation. How do we conduct the marketing? What are the essential parts that we need to know about road freight enterprise, and how does it link with the marketing? Now, at this particular point, we'll also introduce an aspect of entrepreneurship. It's not really ingrained in the module, but I usually like bringing in the concept of entrepreneurship and how you can be able to form a company and how you can be able to market that company to the level that you can be able to make money. Then after that, we'll look at regulatory aspects in road freight. We'll also look at the logistics and road freight transport, whereby we are now looking at the entire logistics function and how does road freight contribute to logistics network formation. Then we look at the future implications in road freight. So we'll have a time to think and look into the future and see what does the future hold for road freight enterprises. So how do you develop future plans? How do you incorporate information technologies, and which information technologies do we expect to use for road freight operation? And also, how do you manage fuel economy? And also, how do you maintain professionalism in the road freight operation? Then finally, we'll look at the general road freight operations, whereby we are going to look at the general requirements for road freight operations. We'll analyze the general requirements for regional road freight management. We'll also discuss how we apply lean management principles to road freight operations for the purposes of minimizing costs. So generally, that is what this course is going to entail. We are going to have fruitful discussions. We expect that those of us who are already working and have experience in this particular industry, they will contribute immensely for purposes of all of us learning. So then we now want to go through an overview. We want to go through an overview of the road freight industry in South Africa. Now, we all understand that close to 80% of goods that are moved in South Africa are moved by road. So we see trucks everywhere, and we see them increasing each and every day, meaning that the road freight is a very important industry in South Africa. And that is why when you look at the Road Freight Association, RFA, they tell you clearly that without trucks, South Africa stops. And in other words, what they're telling you is that if all trucks stop moving in South Africa, what's likely to happen is that you may not have food in the stores, you might not have fuel in the various filling stations, you might not have parts for vehicles, you might not even have new vehicles in some locations. So what it really means is that road transport is very, very important in South Africa, and more so road freight transport is very important. And that is why it is important that we discuss road freight transport within the Republic of South Africa. Now, we get that road freight transports a number of items across the country, and these items include commodities, it includes grains, it includes liquid bulk, it includes car parts, cars, and even containerized goods. So we find that some of the issues associated with road freight are issues to do with overloading, issues to do with creating congestion in our roads, issues to do with the road damage, which of course comes through overloading and accidents, issues to do with pollution. And these are some of the issues, or what we can call sometimes the evils of road freight transport. And how do you manage them? You as the manager. And sometimes the big question that comes to you as managers in this particular field is to ask yourself, how can you reduce overloading? How can you reduce congestion? How can you reduce pollution? How can you reduce or even avoid completely accidents involving road freight vehicles or trucks? So we get that this particular industry has private trucks, and it also has public trucks or public carriers. Now, the private trucks, these are the ones that are owned by companies, and then they transport on their goods. Maybe just for argument's sake, you can have Pick n Pay having their own trucks, and then they transport only Pick n Pay goods. So that is private. It's not available for any other person to use. But you can also have the public ones, whereby you have trucks available for any shipper for a pay. So you go to those trackers, you tell them I have freight that it needs to move maybe from Johannesburg to Durban. They tell you how much they're going to charge you, and they provide you with their service levels, and they offer the service. Then we continue and note that road freight in South Africa is slightly regulated. It's not so much regulated, and it's only regulated in terms of safety. So there are safety measures that all these trucks should have, and also there are, of course, issues to do with safety, especially regarding the goods that you are carrying. For example, if you are carrying petroleum products, you need to observe particular safety measures. And also, there are, of course, a few regulations here and there regarding emissions, but they have not been implemented much by the truckers. But those who have tried, like you can talk of large companies like Nvidia Logistics, they're trying to implement those ones. Then we get that the road freight industry in South Africa is composed of large players. So we have the dominant players, who are not many, maybe about 10 of them. Then we have the small ones, which are also so many. And we also have the one-man operator. So one man owns a truck, he is the driver, and he is managing the operation. So we also have such kind of players. So in other words, we have the sole proprietors, we have the private companies that are doing this particular business. Why do we have them like this? Why are they so many? One of the reasons why there are many is that there are low entry barriers. In other words, you just need to have a truck and you start the business. Now, but because of those low entry barriers, we find that managing a road freight enterprise is usually not an easy thing, or rather managing that operation is usually not an easy thing because there are very high variable costs. Now, the high variable costs makes the operation not to be very profitable unless you manage the costs properly. So, and also what it tells you is that since there are so many players, then you cannot charge what you want. You have to charge the market rates. And for you to charge the market rates, then you have to manage your operations efficiently so that you can make a profit. Now, some of the known benefits of road freight is that it offers door-to-door service. And also we get that it can be able to transport small shipments. And we get that the other modes, for example, if you talk of rail and the water, themselves, they cannot be able to complete a shipment. So they need road freight. They need road freight to be able to complete a shipment. So that is why it is very important that we discuss road freight in South Africa. So I saw a question. Does somebody ask a question? All right. Yes, Aveni, go ahead. Maybe you need to unmute. Aveni, we still can't hear you. Okay, we'll give you another opportunity later. For now, we can continue. So now we want to start looking at the first study unit, and that is ownership and organization forms. Now, as we have already said, we have quite a number of ownership forms. And when we talk of ownership, we are saying that if you are starting a road freight operation, you must select a form of ownership that is likely to meet the needs of the business. It is important that you ask yourself, what are the goals of the enterprise that you are starting? What are the goals? Where do you want to be? Which sector are you serving? So are you better off operating as a sole proprietor? Are you better off operating as a private company? Are you better off operating as a public enterprise? Which is the best form of ownership that will meet your needs? For example, if it's two friends coming together to start an enterprise, you need to ask yourself, you as the friends, what type of liability do you want to subject yourselves to? If you want limited liability, then you go for a private company. If you do not want limited liability, then you need to go for a partnership. So these are some of the things that you need to think about, and then you make a decision. Now, various forms of ownership include sole trader, what we usually call a sole proprietorship. We have the partnership, we have the limited company, can have cooperatives, we can have public authorities. Now, those are public entities. For example, maybe the city of Johannesburg starting their own enterprise. We have the Department of State, now that is like the national government. We have the municipalities, and we also have the public corporations, which offer shares to the general public. So you have to choose the right form of ownership. You have to choose the right form of ownership whenever you're starting an enterprise. And of course, as we said before, regarding the form of ownership, the main or the key determinant will be the objectives, the goals of your organization. the goals of your business. What are the business goals that you have? And which form of ownership would best meet those goals that you have? For example, if the goal is maybe to transport farm produce for many farmers from one point maybe to a processing plant, then you might opt to go for a cooperative. So you have all those farmers whose goods are being moved, coming together, forming a cooperative, then they own a transport enterprise that will be moving their goods. And if when the vehicle is free, it can also offer services to others. So you have to understand what are the goals of the business that you are getting into. Then after you've chosen the right form of ownership, the next thing is you have to look at the structure of the transport industry. Now, when we talk about the transport industry, we are saying you have chosen the form of ownership. Now, you need to familiarize yourself with the transport industry, the road transport industry. You need to familiarize yourself. What are the rules that you need to operate under? So, in other words, it is very important that you know the effects of legislation on the functioning and structure of the transport industry. For example, you need to know how does maybe the South African National Roads Agency Limited, how does it relate to you? What does it require you to have as a tracking company? The cross-border road transport agency, what does it require from you, especially if you are transporting goods across the borders? You need to know something about the road traffic infringement agency. What does it do and what do you need to do so that you keep within their requirements? You need to understand about the Road Traffic Management Corporation. What does it do and what does it require of tracking companies? So it is very important that you understand all these pieces of legislation and how do they relate to your business. Because if, for example, you're transporting goods across the borders, you need to register with the cross-border road transport agency. They need to know that you are moving certain goods from maybe Durban all the way maybe to Harare or maybe to Windhoek in Namibia, or maybe to Lusaka, Zambia. They need to know that you're doing that business. You need to register with them and get a license. So it is very important that you know how your enterprise relates with the particular legislations in your country. And also beyond your country. If you're transporting now goods to Zimbabwe, you need to know what are the road requirements. You're transporting goods to Zambia, what are the requirements? You're transporting goods to Mozambique, what are the requirements? All these are very important. And then we ask the general question, why legislation? Why is legislation important? We say that legislation is very important because if you do not observe the regulations as required by government, you are likely to be on the wrong side of the law. And if you'll be on the wrong side of the law, then you are likely to be charged on those infringements that you have. So we get that for you to have an efficient operation, legislation is required because transport is a very important part of the economy. And also legislation is required because some countries nationalize some of the modes of transport. For example, we know very well that many of the countries across the world have nationalized rail transport and also air transport because it's generally very expensive to develop some of these infrastructure. And because it is expensive to develop them, governments usually have to develop them. And if they develop them, then they have to own them. So, but then we realize that government is usually a very poor in terms of business. So they own these infrastructures. They try to do business, but they cannot manage because of the bureaucracies that are in government. Then we also get that some government legislation will affect the ownership structure of a freight transport company. So, which legislation is likely to affect the ownership structure? And you need to ask yourself that question and make sure that the ownership structure that you have is as per required by law. That the ownership structure that you have is as required by law. Now, you have selected the right form of ownership. You have moved on and you have met all the legislative requirements by the government. Now you are moving to the next stage where you are forming an organization. You are moving to the next step where you are forming an organization. And we want to ask a very serious question now. What is an organization? We want to ask a very serious question. And the question is, what is an organization? Now, there are various theories that have explained what an organization is. And if we can go and be a bit academic, we'll say that one of the theories that have come up to explain what an organization is a theory known as transaction cost economics. Now, this theory of transaction cost economics says that an organization exists because of what it can be able to do. In other words, you ask yourself, what is the reason of existence of a particular organization? And that will be the reason why that organization is in existence. So this particular theory says an organization can only exist if it's able to execute transactions at a lower cost than if these transactions were to be done by individuals. In other words, an organization should bring in some efficiencies that individual persons, if they were working individually, they could not be able to bring those kind of efficiencies. So then that will define the existence of an organization. And I will challenge you to go and read something on the theory of transaction cost economics. Then now we get that an organization exists then because it's offering particular services. An organization exists because it produces particular goods. So an organization must either be offering services or producing goods. And it has to offer these services at a lower cost than if individuals were to offer these services. It has to produce goods at a cheaper cost than if individuals, each one of them, were to produce these goods. So then the question is, how do you manage an organization to achieve its goals? How do you manage an organization to achieve the goals that you want to achieve? Then now we talk of management philosophies that help us to manage organizations. And generally, there are three management philosophies that exist. We have the classical school of thought, or what we can usually call the classical management approach. We have the behavioral school of thought, which we also call the behavioral management approach. We also have the systems school of thought, which sometimes we call the systems management approach. Now, all these are classical theories that try to explain the origin of management and also how to manage so as to achieve the goals of an organization. Now, sometimes we ask ourselves a very big question. Is management a discipline of study? And why is it a discipline of study? We also ask ourselves, is management an art or is management a science? So those are some of the questions that you keep asking yourself. When do you think management started? When did people start studying management? Now, we all understand that when we talk about a road freight enterprise, sometimes back it was seen as an enterprise that did not require high-level skills to manage. But now things have changed, and road freight enterprises are massive organizations. You know, sometimes back, only manufacturers were seen to be serious organizations. Bankers were seen to be serious organizations. But now things have changed, and road freight operators or road freight operations are a series of organizations because of the emergence of supply chain management and logistics management, whereby now, while opposed to traditional road freight operators who used to think about their organization only, a road freight operator now needs to think about the whole supply chain and what effect their decisions will have downstream as well as upstream. And also the rising cost of operations and the desire for all organizations to reduce the cost of operation makes it much more stressing for road freight managers to make sure that they manage the cost of the enterprise as much as they can to a minimum. Then we say, nowadays, or in the contemporary business environment, road freight managers are expected to have a proactive management approach, whereby they come up with innovative solutions. For example, if you think from a client perspective, many of the clients, they want to reduce the number of carriers that they have. For example, if they were having carrier A, carrier B, carrier C, or road enterprise 1, 2, 3, 4 as their carriers, they want to reduce, they want to have an optimal number of carriers so that they can increase their purchasing power or their negotiation power, so that also they can have a serious account that the road freight operators can always fight for. Many of the clients are seeking strategic alliances so that they reduce the risk associated with transportation. Many of the clients are now negotiating more with carriers, meaning that the prices are likely to come down. Many of the clients, they want customized or specialized solutions or services. You get that many of the clients now do consolidation of their shipments so that they can negotiate for quantity discounts. Another thing is that many of the clients nowadays are very serious with service quality. So they are monitoring service quality. So they are thinking of, do we go for service or do we go for cost? They know that. They are thinking of transit time. How long do you take to deliver? They are thinking of what product offerings do you have? Apart from offering transport, can you provide warehousing services? Can you provide customer fulfillment services? Custom order fulfillment services? Can you offer last mile deliveries? So those are some of the dynamics that are existing now. And that's why we're asking ourselves, what management style do we need to use so that we can have a successful road freight operation? Now, we have the three schools. They're not the only one. There are many more. We have the scientific thinking. We have the decision and information sciences approach. We have the contingent management approach. We have many of them, but these ones are the basics. The classical school of thought, the behavioral school of thought, and the systems school of thought. Then we move on now and look at the classical school of thought. And when we talk of the classical school of thought, we are thinking of, we have, and the thinking is that you must have learned about the principles of management sometimes in along your studies, and you also have had an introduction to theories of management. So I'm not going into much details. For example, we know very well, like the classical school of thought, some of the proponents of this particular theory are the likes of Frederick Taylor, the likes of Henry Hunt, who developed what you call a schedule for a schedule of time for managing projects, especially during the Second World War. So we are saying that we have activities, we have objectives, and we have what we call determined goals that we want to achieve. So you want to have people who can be able to meet the goals of the organization. In other words, what the proponents of the classical school of thought were thinking of, they were talking of, you analyze, that the objective is to analyze and control activities of people in an organization. So analyze what activities are being performed by people and control those activities. By doing what? By making sure that you measure what activities are done and how they are done. And then you determine the best way of doing those activities, because you want to improve efficiency and you want to improve cooperation between the people who are performing various activities, and you also want to increase motivation. So for you to achieve these things, then you train people after identifying the best way of doing things. Then the classical school of thought believed that there is no any other motivation when people are working other than money. People work because they are being paid. So this theory was criticized many, many times, and it was seen like it did not have humanity in it. So some of the people, some of the principles of this particular classical theory, it included issues to do with specialization of duties, proper definition of duties, a clear span of control, a clear chain of command, a clear unit of command, and all those, and also it brought out very clearly how do line managers relate with staff. Now, some of the works around this particular classical school included the work of Frederick Taylor under scientific management, the work of scheduling by Henry Hunt, the administrative management by Henry Vayol, and also the bureaucratic management by Max Weber. Those are some of the classical works in that particular period. So then it was clear that from the classical school of thought that line managers have the responsibilities of various activities with the prime objective of the company. So in other words, what we are saying, that for a transport company, the main objective of a transport company is moving goods and people from point A to point B. Now, the line managers must make sure that that function is performed regardless of any other thing. Then the managers must by all means contribute, that is, all the other managers must contribute to the main function. For example, you ask yourself when you form the company, what are the goals of this organization? Our goal is to move goods from point A to point B. So every other person working for that company should have that one in mind. And they should try as much as possible to support the main function. Now, as I said before, the classical theory was criticized by many other scholars who said it did not have a human face. Then now came the behavioral school of thought. Now, the behavioral school of thought came in and said that their aim is to create an organization that achieves the objectives of the company, while at the same time satisfying the people who make up the organization. So it encourages high productivity, just like the classical theory, and low absenteeism of people, but making sure that the work that people do stimulates them to continue coming to work and to produce more. It also enhances cooperation between managers and the workforce, and it makes sure that everyone is pulling towards the right or the same direction. That is meeting the goals of the organization. Now, some of the proponents of this particular theory were the likes of the human relations theory, or the human relations approach, which was fronted by Elton Mayo. We also have the behavioral science approach that was fronted by Follett. We also know about the hierarchy of needs theory by Maslow, and the two-factor theory and theory X and Y, and many others that were fronted by other proponents. I also invite you to read more on these particular theories. Then, but the main objective of this particular school of thought, and that is the behavioral school of thought, is that motivation of employees is key if you want them to achieve the organization's objectives. So remember, the classical school of thought was like motivation is money. But now, here on the other side, what the behavioral schools of thought they're saying is that motivation is key. And sometimes motivation is the work environment. What work environment do you provide for your employees? Sometimes motivation can be money, maybe an increase in pay. Sometimes motivation can be study leave that you offer your employees. Sometimes motivation can be the medical cover that you offer your employees. So you need to have that an organization should have a human face. You as the manager, how do you humanize your management? How do you humanize your organization? How do you make sure that the people you are managing feel like human beings when you are issuing instructions, when you are issuing the orders, when they are following the chain of command? All those things are very, very important. So in other words, what we are saying, well, the bureaucratic nature of the classical theory is very important in terms of maintaining the chain of command and all those things. It lacked the human face. It didn't think about a human being. And the needs of human beings are very important, and they create that particular motivation that is required. So let's have a look at the systems approach. Now, the systems approach was fronted, or one of the proponents of this particular theory is Chester Barnard. And the systems approach generally concentrates on decisions that need to be made to achieve the organization's objectives. So they look at decision making more, so that what policies do you have in place and what actions will be taken for the future success of the business. So then they're thinking like, if you have to succeed, you have to make the right decisions. Because any wrong decision within the system, now here the system is the organization, will lead the organization into failure. So how do you avoid failure? By making the right policies, by making sure that you implement those particular policies in the right way. So the principles of the system school of thought are, you have to specify objectives of the organization very clearly. What are the goals of this organization? What do we want to achieve? And discuss this with your staff. You have to list the subsystems or decision areas within the organization. You have to analyze the decisions. Are they the right decisions? Can we do better than this? You have to design the communications channel within the organization. Then you must have the group decision areas to minimize communication burden. In other words, there must be coordination. And nowadays, you see coordination is done very well by making use of enterprise management systems, so that you increase visibility in the organization. You can be at one workstation, but you can be able to see what's happening on all the other departments within the organization. That kind of coordination is very, very important in the organization. Then we continue and say that the organization structure of a transport company is very, very important. Now, we have now created the management philosophy of our company. We know about the classical thought. We have picked the important parts of it. We know about the behavioral thought. We have picked the important points from it. We know about the systems approach to management, and we have picked the important aspects from it. Now, we know what the objectives of our organization is. We want to move to the next step and now discuss how then, what parts, what functions, what departments are we going to have in a transport company so that we meet the objectives of the company. And the objectives of the company, of course, is to move the goods from point A to point B at the minimum possible cost. But beyond minimum possible cost, of importance is the client service cost trade-off. Does the client go for service, or does the client go for cost? What the client goes for is what you offer. Some clients are not interested about cost. They are interested about service. So they want the service to be as soon as possible. They want a customized service. So cost is not an issue to them. So what do you do? For example, a client wants to deliver Valentine flowers. Now, those Valentine flowers must arrive on the 13th day of February. And they have to arrive maybe in the morning. Then you provide a cost for delivering them on the 13th morning, and you provide another cost of delivering them maybe on the 14th morning or afternoon. Both of these costs, the cost that takes a long period of time is likely to be a cheaper service, while the service that will arrive on the 13th is likely to be a costlier service. Many of the flower companies will choose the expensive cost that will deliver the flowers as soon as possible. So you need to understand the market that you are serving so that you can be able to provide what the clients need. So in this particular case now, we are saying, what should be the structure of a transport company? Now, we note clearly that a transport company is not going to have all those departments that we see in a manufacturing company. It might not work. But there are specific departments that we must have in a transport company so that we can have, or we can meet the major objectives of the company. One, we must have a finance department. Now, the finance section will usually do either investments, and it will also do accounting. Now, in other words, when you talk about investments, it's all about raising money or sufficient finance so that you can buy all the necessary equipment. And sometimes it's not about buying the equipment. It could be leasing those equipment. Actually, we can maybe, instead of the word buy, we can say procure the equipment necessary for the company's operations. Now, when it comes to accounting, it's all about the control or controlling the use of the finance in making sure that the business is efficient. So making sure that the business remains a going concern. So you need control aspects in the finance. Now, apart from that, you need the operations department. And under the operations department, you'll generally be dealing with operating, maintaining, and personnel. So the operating function is generally working out and implementing the vehicle and personnel schedules to conform to company policy and legal requirements. So making sure that the operations is working. While maintaining is making sure that those vehicles that you're using, they're maintained, both from the point of statutory safety requirements and also maintaining the value of the company's assets. For example, you cannot promise to deliver a service with unreliable vehicles. Reliability is such an important aspect in road freight transport that you have to maintain the vehicles at the right time. And here we usually talk about planned maintenance schedules so that you do not wait for failure so that you maintain, but rather you plan maintenance of each of the assets based either of number of kilometers traveled or the period of time that the vehicle has been in operation. So, and in many cases, you can always use the manufacturer's prescriptions to make sure that you maintain the asset as expected. There are also issues of personnel. Now, here, when you're managing operations, you're also managing people. Now, of importance to me in this particular aspect is making sure that you place people where their abilities are. In other words, you must have the right people in the right, or rather performing the right activities. Making sure that the people you have assigned to particular activities, they have the relevant qualifications and abilities to perform those particular functions. Another aspect that is very important, you have the finance department, you have the operations, now you need the business to come. You need the business to flow. For the business to flow, you need marketing. You must market a road freight enterprise. Business will not just come. You'll have to market the business properly. You'll have to get the best salespeople to sell the products that you are offering. Be it you are offering maybe full service, that is, you can collect cargo, you do warehousing of that cargo, and finally you deliver to the client. Or maybe you're just moving from a client to another client. You have to advertise what service you're offering and what are the strengths that you have in the market. In other words, you must understand marketing properly. So sometimes you have to advertise on TV, you have to advertise on radio, you have to advertise on print media to make sure that you are feasible. And you've seen all these transport companies doing this. You've seen them making advertisements. And I challenge you to go maybe and look at the newspapers for tomorrow and see how many of the transport and logistic companies have advertised their services there. And what do the adverts look like? What is the key message they're putting there when they are making the advertisement? That is marketing. So you have to talk about the price that you are offering. You must do market research. And sometimes you don't need to do the market research, but rather you can buy the market research. But big companies, while small companies can have the luxury of buying the market research, big companies should actually have a research and development wing in the company so that they can carry out proper research and develop new products that meet the client's requirements. Now, I just want to pose a question here. Assuming that you understand, or you at least know, you have some knowledge now of the road freight industry in South Africa, what are the emerging products that clients require now? What are the emerging products that clients require in the road freight? When clients are calling for service, what new things are they talking about? Yes, Jongo, just unmute and talk.
Oh, I was actually going to ask a question, but maybe just top of mind, I don't know, would be like tracking, like satellite tracking, like maybe live satellite tracking one. I don't know. And yeah, that's one thing that maybe I would think is a development. I also just had a question with regards to price fixing. Is that like setting the prices as price fixing in some contexts might be collusion?
Yeah. When we talk about price fixing, generally how do you fix prices? Is generally how do you fix prices or how do you price your service? But rather it's not bid fixing.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's not bid fixing, but rather it's just price fixing. It's pricing your service. How do you price your service? Yeah.
All right.
As opposed to bid fixing, whereby players come together and have a collusion. All right.
Yes.
All right. Any other contribution? Okay, of course we know that currently with the increased e-commerce, there are more clients asking now for short deliveries or maybe warehousing facilities that are within urban centers. Because you can imagine if more and more people are buying online, these people are buying online, they expect the goods to be delivered within the shortest possible time. And if that is going to happen, that means we need warehousing facilities closer to these people. And apart from that, we also need a reliable transport service that will do the deliveries. And now we may not need the big trucks, but rather we may need maybe the medium to smaller trucks, which can be able to deliver these goods within a particular locality. Now, these are some of the services that companies are requiring now. So you can imagine that maybe companies like, just for argument's sake, like maybe huge companies like Imperial, getting to a point where they now want to compete with DHL in terms of deliveries. They want to compete with them. So they're offering a full service that they can transport the goods to a warehouse, and after transporting them to the warehouse, they can do order fulfillments and deliver finally to the final customers. So these are some of the things that you need to think about. What are the new products that are coming up in the marketplace? So now I challenge you now to draw an organizational structure of a company that you know and critique it. It could be your company, it could be where you are working. Draw the organizational structure and let it be related to a road transport operation. So you have a minute or two to do that drawing. Draw an organizational structure of the company where you're working or the company that you own, and critique that organizational structure regarding how it relates to a road transport operation. The expectation is that you are drawing, even if you have a phone. I don't think you are sitting in a park. You must be sitting somewhere where you're studying. So you must be having a piece of paper. So draw something there. And I'm going to pick someone at random so that we can be able to know what do you have in your drawing. Yeah, is there somebody who has challenge in hearing me? Kumalo, can you hear me now? Maybe it could be, okay. I'm happy that you are back. Good. All right. So I just want to choose one person to tell us what they have drawn. I want to choose one person and they tell us what they have drawn. So in other words, when you are in class, you have to be very active. So I'm going to choose you. You know, I have all the list of names here. So, Sisakele, are you around? Sisakele? Sisakele, are you around? Hey, they are not talking. So, any frontier? Just tell us what you've drawn. By the way, participation has some recognition, and it's very important that you participate. Lebogang? Lloyd? Pamela? Okay, Lloyd, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Well, in comparison to the freight, road freight, I mean, I work in passenger bus industry, so it's more the financial operations is your key pivotal of the organization structure. So around the finances and all that, or your operations key is key to ensure that everything's running accordingly.
Okay, that's good. So you're saying your company, so the operation is there and the finance is also there.
The finances is there. Marketing in our industry, the marketing is because we're in tourism, so it's key pivotal now with after COVID. But before, your tourism marketing is very central because it's all inbound operators with a transport company. So there wasn't very much marketing as such in newspapers and that type of stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for that. Another one? Any other response from the group? Because you know sometimes when you make these kind of contributions, you'll never forget what we have discussed. And even when it comes to you writing your assignments or your any other, it gives you a head start to start an argument. All right.
So I see there's a
Do we have any other?
in the
Yes,
chat
Christina? Christina? Yeah, I can see in the chat box there is Tandapiwa Mbali, you saying maybe another addition can be maybe perishables. That is like you have departments for the various goods being transported. So you have perishables and you also have pharmaceuticals. Yeah, that's true. That is good. Thank you for that addition. Yeah, that is especially if you are a big company and you are not specialized, so you're offering a number of services. So you love to have those kind of functions. Christine has some challenges. Ntombela, you were saying something. Go ahead.
No, I was also going to say I'm also on the public transport, passengers, but the subsidized one. So in our organization, we've got marketing, which consists of the PRO, which creates that relationship within the company and the passengers we transport. And we've got the BPM under marketing, which maps and business planning under marketing. Then we've got finance department, we've got operations department, which is the core of the business operations. And we've got technical, which they are looking after our vehicles. But maybe to critique, as you said, we must also critique, I feel, maybe in the core of business, which is operations, we need more resources. It's under-resourced according to my critique on that one. Thank you.
That's very good. Thank you very much for that. That is a very good addition. So we want to continue. We see we are almost, our time is almost up. So I want to continue and wind up. So now, once we have looked at the company structure, we want to put it clearly like this, that when you are forming a company structure, it is very important that the activities which are interrelated, you group them together for cohesion in the organization, so that the organization can run in a very cohesive way. So in other words, we are saying that when you are making these decisions, you must very clearly have the policy group grouped together. Those activities that are related to formulating of company policy, those activities that relate to the planning of how the objectives will be achieved, they should be grouped together in the organization. Now we have the action group. Now these are the managers who are going to implement and provide information to the policy group. So in other words, when you have the executives there at the top who are drawing this particular organization policies, each of the departments within the organization should be well represented at the policy group. The policy group must receive information from the action group. Then, after the action group, we have the planning group, which is going to advise the finance, it's going to advise the technical and HR on the various technological developments. What should be done into the future? And once that one is done at the planning group, it should also move up and inform the policies of the organization. And finally, we have the control group, which generally oversee the running of the company. Now the control group makes sure that the efficiency is there, the quality is there, and whether the decisions made by the action group are meeting the goals of the organization. So that kind of coordination is required so that we can be able to have a very cohesive organization. And this interrelation is very, very important in an organization. In other words, what we are saying is that there is no function in an organization that is standalone. All the functions in the organization are interdependent. All the functions in the organization are interdependent, and they have to work together for the common good of the organization. Now, when that happens, when all the parts of the organization work together, what happens is that the clients will be happy with the services provided by the organization. So in other words, the marketing group should be able to talk to the booking group, should be able to link properly with the freight handling group, which should be able to link properly with the documentation and the vehicle dispatch group. In other words, the use of a good information system is very, very important in the contemporary business environment. Because sometimes you can advertise very well, then you have clients making orders, only to realize that all the orders you've made, none of those orders is going to be met because you have over-advertised. The vehicles are not available. Then it becomes a big, big crisis for yourself and for the company. So far, so good. That brings us to the end of our discussion today. So now I will take a few questions, then we close. Otherwise, thank you very much. So if you have questions, you can now ask.